Yo, what is going on, you guys, and welcome back to a brand new video and another What If Spider-Man fanfiction video. In this video, we're going to be discussing what would have happened if Peter Parker was never recruited by Tony Stark in Captain America's Civil War, and how the events of the MCU would have played out. But before we get into that, if you are new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button and make sure to hit the bell next to the subscribe button so you can get notified as soon as the videos go out and you can be one of the first ones to watch the video. Also, over 80% of you guys aren't actually subscribed to the channel either. Honestly, if you guys do like this sort of stuff, you know, consider hitting that red button. Also, make sure to go in the description below if you want to join the Discord server. We have all sorts of cool chats on there about all stuff Spider-Man related. And with that being said, let's get straight into the video. So we start our story at the apartment Peter Parker has in Civil War. He comes home and Aunt May is sat on the couch, but no Tony Stark. This was the point at which Tony would introduce himself to Peter, and he would recruit Peter to help him fight in Captain America Civil War in Berlin. But he isn't here at this time. There will be reports all over the country about the Sokovia Accords and the recent events involving the Avengers. Peter sits down to watch the news and sees that currently Captain America is on the run and is now being dubbed as dangerous and as a war criminal. Peter doesn't believe it. Cap was one of the people he looked up to as a kid. Captain America and Iron Man were the two Avengers Peter looked up to as a kid and the most. And now he follows the same path of responsibility. Peter will think of it's almost like watching mum and dad fight. Aunt May will say it's unbelievable what's happening out there, and Peter will agree. So at this point in the story, instead of being dragged out into the conflict, Peter will watch from afar and reflect on the conflict between the two sides instead. Months will go by and Peter will carry on saving people and doing his friendly neighborhood things, but the only difference here is that instead of having the Stark suit, he will have the homemade suits. The events will play out relatively the same, and Spider-Man will start to become a popular name around Queens and parts of New York as he's been going around on YouTube just like in the actual movie. However, he is still overshadowed by the likes of the Avengers, Iron Man, etc. And especially after the Sokovia Accords and Civil War, superheroes won't be the most popular things at the time. Ned will still find out that Peter is Spider-Man just like he did in the real movie, except things will be a little different, and Peter will be in his homemade suit instead of the Stark suit when the reveal happens, and the conversation will go a little different as well. Ned will still ask if he knows Iron Man, and Peter will say no this time, but Ned will still freak out that his best friend is a superhero. Then Peter and Ned will be invited to Liz's party, just like they did in the actual movie. They get there and Peter and Ned go in, and the same events will play out where Flash will make fun of Peter and ask him to get Spider-Man to show up. Peter will agree and he'll go outside and get into the costume, and then contemplate with himself outside the house for a while, before seeing an explosion go off in the distance. Peter rushes to the scene. The same sort of events will play out, except Peter doesn't have much versatility as he did in the Stark suit. He will attempt to take them down, which will result in the Vulture battle once again. Vulture will drop him out of the sky and Peter will fall into the water, but he will hit hard. It also is quite cold at night and Peter will almost be in shock from the water. If you remember in the original scene, Iron Man rescued him, but this time he's gonna have no one there for him. Peter swims to the surface as fast as he can, as his suit drags him. He climbs out of the lake by himself. Peter crawls his way back to the rooftop, in which time their party is actually over. He grabs his stuff and he leaves. He's cold and tired. Peter returns home at the dead of night. His web shooters have been damaged and his costume was soaked. He's gonna have to repair and maybe even buy new clothes. He gets home and Aunt May asks where he has been. Peter, with tears in his eyes, just said he's had a bit of an incident. Aunt May asks why he didn't call her to come get him, and he says that he couldn't. Peter pulls out his phone and it's all wet. Aunt May asks what happened to Peter, and he stutters over his words to try and find a good enough excuse, but he can't come up with one, as he's flustered. Aunt May can tell that he's lying and calls him out on it. She says that after everything that happened with her and Ben, all she wants is honesty. She tells Peter that she's heard him coming in really late some nights, but she's just played it off as him just being a teenager and trying to be rebellious. Peter fights back and says that's not what it is, and Aunt May says to tell her, and Peter says that he can't. Aunt May almost begs him to tell her. Peter says that it'll be fine, and it'll all work out in the end. Peter goes away and reflects on what has just happened. He had to be dishonest with Aunt May for her safety. He couldn't tell her that he was Spider-Man. The right path isn't always the easiest, and will come with the consequences. The rest of the movie from here on out I see playing out relatively the same as it already did, except Peter will once again be with his homemade suit. This will be up until the ferry scene where Vulture and his goons will attack, and Spider-Man will be holding the ferry together and he can't quite keep it together, and then Iron Man will swoop down to save the day. Peter will be surprised that Iron Man is there, and Iron Man will follow Spider-Man to the top of the building, and they will interact for the very first time. Tony says that that's a pretty hefty shift for a kid his age. Then Peter will start fanboying out the fact that he's met Tony Stark. Tony goes on to say that he's been keeping tabs on Spider-Man for a long time and reveals that he knows his secret identity and that his name is Peter Parker. Peter tries to play it off as if he got the wrong guy, just like he did in Civil War, but Tony will say that he knows. Tony will reveal that he was going to recruit him into the Civil War between him and Cap, but decided to keep him away from all of it, in which it's revealed was the big decision that allowed this alternate timeline to skew as it has. Tony asks Peter why does he do what he does, and Peter says that when you can do the things that I can but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they're gonna happen because of you. Tony tells Peter as good as he is, he's gonna have to stay away from the Vulture stuff. Tony likes what he does and why he does it, but he says that he must not interfere. This is higher than his pay grade, and more on the level of a Tony problem than a Peter one. Peter can understand what Tony means and decides maybe he should just listen to him. The movie carries on relatively the same on from this point out, except there is now one key difference. Most of the movie and after that interaction with Tony going forward, Peter is going to be mainly independent as Spidey away from the Avengers. He still exists within the same world, but he's not going to have the Stark suit or the help from Tony until a lot later on, because Tony doesn't really know Peter at this point like he did in Civil War, and there's no reason Tony should recruit him for the Avengers now after Civil War has happened. We will skip forward later in the movie where Peter finds out that Vulture has a plan from the now moving Avengers Tower. And then we cut to the homecoming scene where he stands awkwardly in Liz's house. They will get a lift to homecoming just like in the original movie from Adrian Toomes, and then the same thing will happen. Adrian will find out Peter's secret identity and then he'll have the chat with him. Peter debates with himself. He should listen to Tony Stark, but he's his own superhero. He's not an Avenger. He has the responsibility and he will take the path that he knows is right, just like earlier in the movie with Aunt May, even if it comes with consequences. And that's really what this story has become about. It's one massive over-exaggerated story of responsibility and consequence. And if that had happened in Civil War, this is probably what Homecoming would have been like. It would have played more on the psychology of Peter Parker and the way that he deals with consequence and responsibility as Spider-Man. His relationship with Aunt May has been damaged. He is going against Tony Stark, of all people, even when he's been told not to go after the Vulture. And just like in the original movie, he will ditch Liz Allen to go and find her dad. And once again, Peter Parker's luck strikes again. Peter will go after the Vulture, and he will stop him once and for all, even though he has probably lost some things along the way. But at the end of the day, he's done the right thing, just as Spider-Man always does. At the end of the film, Tony will call Peter and apologize for underestimating him. Peter in the original movie was more friendly with Tony Stark, but in this instance, they don't really know each other as much as well as they did in the original. Peter will tell him that he respects him and that he looks up to him, but Peter has a responsibility to fulfill every time he puts on the costume. Tony says that he understands. He also says that he's a good kid and one day he'll be the best of all of them. He may not be an Avenger, and at this point in the movie, Peter doesn't want to be, but he will be the best. Peter from the end of Civil War to this point has matured, his character has grown, he's gone from wanting to be with the Avengers to dealing with consequences and responsibilities to show that maybe the Avengers aren't always right. It's almost like the original Homecoming, except for it's more over-exaggerated and Spidey is more on his own. I think this version of the movie would be very similar, however I do believe that this version of Tom's Spidey would also be way more distant than the other one that we actually got in the MCU, and then Far From Home in this timeline would play out very, very different to the actual movie, as I think Peter's ideologies sway very heavily. And with the responsibility, I think this Peter would sacrifice giving up his vacation to willingly stop Mysterio at all costs, along with the fact that he wouldn't even have the glasses either. So anyway, Far From Home and the rest of the timeline would play out quite different, but this is how it all probably would start. Also at the end of the movie, instead of getting the Stark suit back just like he did in the original, Peter Parker will create his own Spider-Man suit, just like he did in Far From Home, but it'll be more tailored towards the classic Spider-Man suit from the comics without a bunch of the tech and the Stark stuff. Anyway, with that being said, that has been it for What If Tony Never Recruited Spider-Man in Civil War. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and make sure to leave a like down below if you did enjoy it. And like I did say at the start of the video, make sure to hit the bell next to the subscribe button to not miss any more videos like these, and you can be one of the first ones to watch the videos as soon as they go out. And with that being said, thanks for watching and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.